Man, you love a good Jake Forbes pick.
That Boogie Nights meme is flying right now.
The thing is, when I think of Jake,
Forbes.
when I think of Duthie and I think of his Jake Forbes, it's got to be a clean look. Like, you can't have Ron Jeremy with that mustache.
No,
and that
you can't.
Greasy hair.
You can't have that.
You got to have a clean-looking dude.
That's right. Man of integrity, Jake Forbes. Right? We won't stand for anything less than that. Yeah, James Duthie will be a big part of the panel tonight, a.k.a. Jake Forbes. And I got Leafs Devils tonight on TSN Radio as well. Joe Bowen, Jimmy Ralph in about an hour. Craig Button coming up here in a moment. You see Craig's list. He's moving some pieces around. That Schaefer kid he's got at number 1 now.
Oh, man. I would have him at 0.
He looked great, man. Too bad he got hurt. That was a big issue for Canada. He did get hurt, and he was driving
that guy
offense.
they could have said, you got the cage, you're young, but you are literally going to be the guy on this team. Him and that McKenna.
Yeah.
And then he went down. But some team is going to get a guy for 15 years, first up on the penalty kill, first up on the power play, moves the puck up the ice, has great vision, makes plays. Like, I don't see anybody. There's some other, the Mahagans, the American kid's a good player, but I don't see how anybody takes that guy down from the number 1 spot.
Well, here, I'll give you a team that won't take him. The Buffalo Sabres.
They got 2 guys.
You've got Dahlin, you've got Power, and now you've got Byram. You can't take Schaefer too. I mean,
no.
They might, but
yeah, you do take Schaefer, and you do other things with other people.
Well, that's what you
Give
could
your
do.
head a shake.
If you believe he's that much better, if you believe the Schaefer kid's the best player, maybe you do take him and you move off Owen Power. You're not moving off Dahlin. He's your captain. You've paid him. I think he's got a full no trade, full no move.
Not a lot of people bring up Dahlin. Like, he seems to get a hall pass because he's like gritty and
Big
stuff.
time.
But it's like, dude, you signed for 11 sheets, man.
Yeah, he's one of the highest paid players in the league.
Yeah.
And they gave him the captaincy. They said, "You're the guy. Like, you're the one. We tanked. Not for McDavid. We tanked for you, Rasmus Dahlin. You're our guy, and you have to drag us out of this." They actually beat Carolina in the afternoon yesterday.
Yeah,
which was pretty crazy. But, as of right now, Chicago, the Blackhawks feel like it's a formality that they're going to be the last place team, but it doesn't mean you're going to win the lottery.
So what does that mean? If I'm the owner, I go right to the GM and say, remember when you fired the coach and you didn't think we were a last place team? What do you think now? What are you
Exactly. Like, if Luke Richardson's probably like, guys, like, do you really think I was the problem?
And by the way, thanks for making me look bad and dealing with this mess. And it's actually your fault giving me that team.
Yes. Like, you look at their roster, even the moves that they made, where Tyler Bertuzzi's been better recently in terms of point production.
Yeah.
But he was like, he's not a star player.
Dude, it
he's
doesn't
not an
matter
impact.
how it should look. It could look. I looked at it on paper and I'm like, maybe they win a bunch of games this year. They're awful.
They're not. They are a terrible team. They are legitimately the worst team in the league, and they deserve to be dead last in the league. That's where they are. San Jose is not far. Like, San Jose had a decent start. They're back to reality. Like, they are bringing it down to the studs in San Jose. Mm-hmm. Like, I think Mike Greer's made some really smart plays, and he's gotten out from some contracts, and they've got young kids there. Like, I think Greer's got that going in the right direction.
But both to get to
but they're not close.
It's a long way to go.
And every organization and shows like ours will talk about it, and it's rightfully so the way athletes are these days. You better get it on track, because Celebrini and Bedard, they don't want to be associated with a gong show for too long. They take it personally. They're like, I don't want to deal with this. So you better get it right sooner or later.
Well, and here's another thing.
But you know how many times we said that in Edmonton, where it's like, they better figure this out.
Absolutely. And there's no bridge deals anymore.
Yeah.
Like, if this is who Celebrini is, in 2 years he's going to say, I want $11 million a year, or so, whatever it is. It's going to cost you a lot of money. Like, young players, they get out of that entry-level deal. If they're legit, they get paid.
Well, they could also scare you and say, I'm not nothing long-term, sorry. You figure it out.
Possible, but it's still going to be a high cap hit, right? Like, that's another thing. And obviously Chicago and San Jose knew they weren't going to get the best of the entry-level deal because the teams just weren't that good.
Right.
Like, you knew Bedard, it was going to be a struggle for a bit, Celebrini for sure. But it is a huge advantage to win games with guys making $900,000 or whatever, because you got 3 years of that, then they're going to make a lot more money.
But I'll tell you what, you can get a stud on your team if you're Connor Bedard and you get the number 1 overall pick and he's a stud,
yes,
suddenly you start to feel a little better about your lot in life.
Absolutely. Here's Craig Button, our TSN Director of Scouting, joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Craig, we were just talking about your list, your midseason draft list. You got Schaefer now at 1. You know, if you're Chicago and you end up with that first pick and you get Schaefer, how does that sound? Bedard and Schaefer moving forward.
It sounds good. I mean, I think Matt Schaefer's a defenseman like Drew Doughty. They control the game, and he's a true number 1. I mean, how many true number 1 defensemen are there in the league? 12? 13? No. There's not 32.
No.
And, you know, they drafted Lashunov last year in the first round, and good player, but he's not a number 1. He's not a guy that's going to control the game for you. And the Chicago Blackhawks, it's not like they're not like San Jose. San Jose, to me, like if they have a chance to draft a player at 1, it's Schaefer because they don't have a guy like that. And if they're drafting 2, they should draft Porter Martone, in my view, because they don't have a player like that. They have centers. They don't need centers. And to me, Chicago needs a lot of everything. So take the guy that can control the game, and I think that Matt Schaefer is that guy.
What Hayes brought up an interesting scenario, Craig, and I know what I would do. What if Buffalo gets it? Are you still drafting him?
I just heard Dave talk about it's a good start if you can get these top players like Bedard and Celebrini. But isn't there a caveat to that? Isn't that what Buffalo's had for 14 years?
No kidding.
Right? You know, so it's not just, you're right, Dave. Like to be able to have the ability to draft these players and to set the course for your franchise with a franchise player, it's really important. But it's also what you do after that. So, Jeff, to your question about Buffalo, you know, Buffalo just seems to me to be in a place where they're like the Detroit Lions. Like, they had top picks, they had good players, and they could never win. And, you know, to me, what's the identity of the Buffalo Sabres? Do they have one? I don't know what it is. I don't know if they don't even know what it is. No. So, to me, you got to, like, Dan Campbell went into Detroit, and he just said, here's what we're going to be. And there were some growing pains, but they knew what they wanted to be. They knew who they want. I don't think Buffalo knows who they want to be or what they want to be. So to your question, you know, like it's one of those, I guess it's an existential question. What do the Buffalo Sabres do? Because I'll tell you this, I don't think they know what to do.
That seems to be the case. You know, it really does seem to be the case that down in Buffalo, it's just constant turnover, constant finger pointing, constant, I don't know. I mean, it's just year after year after year. They haven't been in the playoffs in, 13 years, 14 years, and they're not even close. It sucks for the fan base. And yet, to your point, Craig, it's one thing if you accept, okay, we're not going to be that good, but here's the plan. Like I was saying that prior to you coming on. Like if I'm in San Jose, I'm looking at what Mike Greer's doing, saying, I get this. I think I know where we're going here. Like it might take some times, and there's going to be some misses, but you had to shed contracts. Then you're going to load up on young players. You're going to try to get top picks. All right, we got a plan here. Buffalo, I don't know. I mean, I really, and even Chicago, I wonder what you think their plan is. Like clearly, it was to bottom out and get Bedard. They did that. Now what? Because they fired Luke Richardson as if they considered this a legitimate team this year, and they're not. Yeah. They're awful.
Well, they are awful, and Kyle Davis at the beginning of the year talked about trying to fast forward the rebuild. Fast forward the rebuild? Are you kidding me? Like, you're hearing everything going on in Chicago right now. The players' spirits are broken. They're not high. They're losing. They're getting beat up bad. The fans are booing. They're going to stop showing up. They can't get their games on TV. I mean, it's a mess in Chicago. And to your point about San Jose, you think about, like, Mike Greer said, you know what, we're going to have to move off of Hurdle. So, you know, he took on a little bit of salary, and he makes a trade. He moves off of Carlson, you know, holds on a little bit of salary, but says we're moving on. And then when he sees a chance to get a number one goaltender in his car up, boom, he acts. He's got a real good defenseman in Dickinson. They got real good players in Will Smith and Celebrini, obviously. But they got Quentin Mustin. They got Casper Holton and William Eklund, who are already there. So some really good players. And what you can see, to me, Mike Greer, it was a competitor big time. He knew he played on good teams. He understands that you've got to have different players in different spots. You can't just collect players. You can't just collect players and collect picks and everything. I'm going through this with Montreal now in different media. Oh, no, keep getting picks. All these picks and all these prospects are not going to play for the Montreal Canadiens. So you better recognize at some point in time, we better help our current group. We better help them taste a little bit of success. Because if they don't start tasting success, good luck having success.
With Craig Button, and in terms of where the Leafs are at going into this game tonight, you got John Tavares now, week to week. He's been placed on the IR. They've lost 3 games in a row in regulation, Craig. Is there a player in particular on the Leafs that you have circled tonight that you believe has got to lead the charge and have a big night?
Yeah, I would put it on the captain and 3 of them, like Nylander, Marner, and Matthews. I mean, they're top players. You're facing the crux of it. I don't think you can ask, other players to kind of show the way. I mean, it would be different if you had that catalyst type player. Like, I mean, in Detroit, I just go back to Detroit, like Scotty Bowman could run out McCarty, Draper, and Maltby to set a tone, but Toronto doesn't have that. So I think you have to look at the top players and just say, hey, if I'm Craig Berube, hey, listen, we really give us your best tonight. Just give it everything you got tonight. You got tomorrow off, and you know what? We'll make sure. But those are the guys that I'd be just trying to just pat on the back. Hey, I'm going to ride you tonight. Get out there, and you're going to be playing lots.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday, right? That like they need either a line or a power play. They need something they can look at and say.
2 things, a goalie and a line, a power play and a player. They need 2 of something because they got nothing right now.
They don't have, it's flat more or less across the board right now.
Well, another thing they don't have, Craig, is production on the offensive side from the back end. And you talked off the top about how hard it is to get a number 1 defenseman in this league and how a lot of teams don't have one. The guy the Leafs have traditionally thought of as their number 1 defenseman, Morgan Rielly, is going through his worst offensive season, I believe, since 2016-17 in terms of points per game. What do you make of Rielly's inability to really be the offensive force he has been in the past?
I think the way they played in the past, Dave, I think afforded him a lot more of those opportunities. Craig Berube and this coaching staff is asking Morgan to play a little bit differently. I mean, you had Jake McCabe, you had Chris Tanev, you had Oliver Ekman-Larsson. So I think there's been a shift in the focus. And so Morgan Rielly's not being asked to, contribute offensively in the same manner. Now, what I will say is this. I think the key is not always about points. It's about, can you get out of your zone quickly, and can you get the puck onto the sticks of your good offensive players? I think the Toronto Maple Leafs have enough good offensive players, and it's not so much about do they get the points, but can they get the offense moving in the right direction? Can they get the play moving in the right direction? I think that that's the next step for this blue line, and I think they've made some strides, but I think on the power play, they got to switch up the power play. When I say switch it up, he's a distributor. He's a puck transporter, and he can get the puck into the right places. But now he becomes a little bit easier to defend if you're the penalty killing team, because he's not really that threat to thread the pass or to make that big shot. So I think there has to be a change there. But I think where the Leafs find themselves with respect to how they want to play, it's about moving up the puck to the offensive players. I think they're doing a better job of that this year. But I think that's the difference that I think that Morgan and the rest of the blue line have to become acclimated to in terms of how the offensive push starts from real good defensive play.
Craig, how would you handle the situation out in Vancouver? Because when it first happened, I was like, maybe that Miller and Pettersson had a pissing match and it's not that big a deal. But clearly there's an issue. And the team's struggling. I think something needs to be done sooner than later, because who wants this to linger on and fester, and the performance on the ice continues to go downward? Like, how would you handle this?
Well, Jeff, I'm a big believer is when you have a problem, identify it and look at the solutions. Yes. And I use the term often, and it is problems that go away by themselves come back by themselves. Nobody wants to be asked daily, what do you think about JT Miller? What do you think about Elias Pettersson? And when you get ready to play the game, everybody's going to dig in and play. I think that that's the case, but it's a distraction, and you don't need, the game's hard enough as it is. You don't need distractions. So I think when you're looking at this from internally and me externally, like, you got to say, okay, what are the solutions? What can you do? How do you deal with it? And then you got to act, because back to what I just said, you got a problem. If you want to move forward individually and collectively, you got to find solutions. That's true of any walk of life. And I think that's where Jimmy Rutherford and Patrick Alvin find themselves right now, is trying, and the solution, it may not be easy. Like, don't get me wrong here. It's not like you just wave a magic wand, and you have to identify, is this something that can be resolved internally through our own, or do we have to make a move? But if you don't address the problem and you're not ready to deal with it, the problem will linger. And I don't think that's good for the team. So whatever that turns out to be, Jeff, if you got to get the players in and say, hey, what's going on here? You guys got to sort it out because I'm not moving either one of you. Okay, you resign yourself. You got to move somebody. Whatever it is, you got to do it. You got to commit to it.
Yeah, it's got to be awkward in that room right now. Like the elephant
How
in the
would
room.
want to deal with it? That's where I would get to the point as a teammate. I would look at them and say, nobody wants to deal with this nonsense.
No, exactly. But the issue is, and again, we don't have the answers. It could be just one of them that's the problem.
Yes.
It may not be collectively or equal, right?
Most likely it is one. There's generally not two guys that are a pain in the ass like towards each other.
Right, and that's exclusive to that. Like it's just you two guys, and then when you're with everyone else, everything's all good. So they know, and they've known the issue. The conundrum is, as you know, Craig, we all know, prior to last year, the Canucks have not had any success in quite some time. And it's a market that is volatile. It's a market that's not happy right now. And everything broke their way last year. They had a magical season. Everything was incredible. They almost won the President's Trophy. They beat Nashville in just a remarkable fashion. Remember all the comebacks and late goals and overtime heroics. And then they almost had Edmonton with a third-string goalie. And you show up at camp this year and you're thinking, this is it, man. Like, it's go time in Vancouver. And we're halfway through the season, and they may not make the playoffs, and everyone hates everyone. It's a PR disaster.
It is.
Like, it's a disaster.
They got to be thinking as a fan base, we can't have nice things.
Yeah, what happened here? How did this happen?
Yeah, and to Jeff's point, like, the players know. They always know, and they always know first. And they can't deal with the issue. So it's not up to the players to deal with it. They don't want to be bothered. And like, can you imagine the media walking in every day? They're going, are they going to ask me? Are they going to ask me? Please don't ask me. Please don't ask me. Because it's lingering. It's like a bad smell that keeps lingering. And, one of the things that, and I'm not saying they should do it, but if they're not going to, if they're not going to do anything, or I shouldn't say do nothing. If they've examined the problem and they've looked at solutions, then somebody's got to come out, the manager, and say, listen, we've dealt with this internally. We're satisfied that we're moving forward. No more questions. And you guys get going. And you got to say that privately and publicly.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that yet.
No, I haven't heard that yet either. And, it's not the only sideshow in town, right? You've got, last week we had the Bruins stuff and the reporting on that and whether or not it's, what it leads to or what have you. But I'm sure you saw it. Cam Neely came out today and spoke with the media and said that as of now, their management group, we have to have two paths to move forward with. One where we're a buyer at the deadline and one where we're a seller at the deadline. Like, he's saying that on the record.
They're in a playoff spot.
And they're in the playoffs, and it's Boston. It's the Bruins.
That's trying to get a spark.
Do you think that's more about a mess? Is that how you read that, Craig?
He's even thinking about being a seller.
I know because Boston has established that standard, right? Because we go back, we're just talking about the Canucks, right? And so we talk about do they deserve good things? Well, the Bruins don't think that way. We're a playoff team and whatnot. So I do think there's a dual message there, one to the players and one that says, hey, like I guess there's a disguised message, Cam Neely, to the players. Yeah, is this what we really become? Is this what you want? And I love what Pasternak and Marchand did after those comments. And then, hey, it's great to come out and deny it. And I believe the players, don't get me wrong. But then they went out and performed.
Yeah.
They squashed that in a big way through their performance. And I think that Cam right now, he's looking at it, and I can sit here and go, well, you got to be realistic. Maybe they should be sellers or whatnot. But that's not the mentality in Boston. And I agree with Jeff. I think that's just a little bit of a smokescreen and probably a pretty strong message to the players.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. I mean, when Cam Neely speaks, I would think people certainly listen in Boston for sure. All right, Craig, we'll leave it there. Good catching up with you. We'll do it again soon.
Yeah, great catching up with you guys, too. Have a great day.
There's Craig Butner, TSN, Director of Scouting, joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Count on Maple Toyota for the right winter tire package for your Toyota. Trade in your old tires, buy a new set, and get $40 back. Visit mapletoyota.com. Yeah, that probably is a bit of a message that if they don't snap out of it and get going, well, we might have to sell. Might have to be a seller. But I still think the Bruins are going to make the playoffs. It's what happens beyond that is very debatable at this point. Columbus like they're in a playoff spot right now. They've won 5 games in a row.
I never felt like any threat from owner. Like when the owner came down, like Peter Karmanos didn't come down to the locker room a ton, but when he did and give it to the guys or whatever, it just didn't affect me. Like it's just such a focus. I thought of it as I'm like, I got to go out there and I got to get 5 hits and 5 shots on net. And if this guy's telling me he's going to blow this thing up, it really, like, I was like, what am I going to do?
Yeah, I guess so.
You know what I mean?
Fair.
Like the threats are like, oh, we're going to be a seller or a buyer. It's like, I'm just dying to get 5 shots on net and 5 hits and play well. And if you're going to do that, there's nothing I can really do about it.
Especially back then, no salary cap.
Anytime, it's like the players go out and do their thing, and they give it their all, and sometimes the team just stinks. Like
that's the thing. They've already fired the coach. They've already blamed the coach. And now Cam Neely's pointing to the personnel, saying some of you guys aren't going to be here. So I hope if you like Boston, shape up.
Yeah.
But when your team's not that good, do they consider that a threat? Some of you guys aren't going to be here. They might be like, okay, then put me somewhere else.
Wow, listen, the Bruins, they're 22-19-5. You got a minus 22 goal differential.
That's the thing.
Not very good.
Not very good.
Like they haven't been that good. Like
And Marchand's 36.
But the thing is, they'd won 6 in a row recently or something, haven't they?
Well, they've won a couple.
They got the coach bump when Sacco took over.
Yes, they did. Yes.
So that's twice now. But do you think like the last third of the season, they're going to like turn it on and be different than what they are? Sometimes like what you are is what you are. Like, do you think they're going to morph into some offensive dynamo and be some threat in the playoffs now?
Well, and the thing is, they played more games than anyone in the East outside of Pittsburgh. They played 46 games. All these young, hungry teams like Ottawa and Montreal and Columbus, they've all got games in hand.
Yeah.
That's the thing, man. I mean, it's not a guarantee. It just, history would suggest they'll find a way to get in there and they'll play better down the stretch. But they played 46 games and they've been mediocre. That's what the Bruins are right now. They're a mediocre team.
Well,
at best.
And the goalie they gave all that money to has been a mediocre goaltender.
Yeah, Swayman's
maybe worse.
Struggled for sure. He has. Yeah,
and you wonder, that whole
that guy would piss me off too if I handed him the money and he said he's this and that, and then you give him the money. And
I thought that that whole back and forth between Swayman and management that became public, didn't that sort of set this team up for a tough year? Like it set Swayman up to be in a regression year. Like it was like when you talk that big and you demand that much, a lot of pressure there.
Well, countless examples of that. Guys who miss camp, guys who are focused on their contracts, guys who put that spotlight on them because someone else had to leave for you to stay in a market like that. Yeah, he set himself up possibly for failure.
Yeah.
And it's a one-off, but they're committed to him. Like he's going to be there throughout his career, I would presume. But it hasn't been good enough for Swayman. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's another example of where, the Leafs have lost 3 in a row. Not good, not acceptable, got to be better. But
could be worse.
It could be worse, certainly in the East. And the Leafs and Devils playing tonight on TSN. All right, little panel night tonight. Good stuff. We'll catch you tomorrow. Bring your A game tomorrow.
Yeah, I got an emergency Hazy B to maybe lead off the show. Dear Hazy B, a guy's going to the Habs game with a bunch of different people. We might have to do it first. A Dear Hazy B to start the show tomorrow on a Friday.
I love that. I love that. Set the tone for the weekend, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Dear Hazy B, maybe out of the gate tomorrow. I like it. Okay.
And we'll go through some Brock Forbes. What's our guy's name?
Jake Forbes.
Jake Forbes.
Yeah.
Give us some details on what this guy's all about and what his action is.
Okay,
we'll break him down tomorrow.
Yep, full breakdown. All right, Leafs Devils on TSN 4 and on TSN Radio tonight.
See you, boys. Thanks.
There's the O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill. Dave Feschuk sticking around on Bryan Hayes. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Overdrive continues, powered by FanDuel. Get to our best bets brought to you by FanDuel. A little bit later this afternoon, heading down to the Leaf game tonight. Going to see a lot of our friends from FanDuel, a lot of TSN people down there. We got Leafs Devils tonight, and be close to the Rogers Center as well, where I'm sure they are working around the clock down there. Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro trying to figure this out because it's starting to get a little bit louder around off-season acquisitions as we get closer to spring training. There's still a lot of big names out there. Roki Sasaki, who is a young stud starting pitcher coming out of Japan, very unique situation because the posting, there's only so much money he can get, right? Because of his age and because of his tenure on playing pro in Japan. So this isn't a scenario where he's going to be making a fortune.
No.
He is he will make a decision in the next 8 days, I believe it is. The window is open, and he has, I want to say, until the 24th, I believe it is,
right,
to make a decision. So we're going to know soon if he's going to the Dodgers, the Padres, or the Blue Jays. And if the Blue Jays land him, and I know a lot of people roll their eyes, and I'm skeptical too, if you land him, that would be very significant. Hugely significant. And they need a win like that. Like, I can still paint a picture here for a positive offseason where you brought in Hoffman. I know it felt strange, and you're worried about the physical, and you're worried about the shoulder. But the last 2 years, he's been an elite bullpen arm.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Elite. You brought Jimmy Garcia back. You know who he is. Garcia is what he is. He's an innings filler, more or less. But still, he's a guy that is somewhat reliable, will stay healthy. You know what you're getting. You're banking on Swanson returning to where he was a couple of years ago. It was a disastrous season for him. Chad Green, you got him for a full year. You're trying to piece together a bullpen. You bring in Sasaki. Maybe you can piece together with Sasaki, Bowden, Francis, if he is down the stretch. Again, this is all glass half full, and this is internal improvement on OverDrive here in terms of what the Jays would be promoting. But you also made the Jimenez deal. The bat is what it is, but defensively, he's a superstar. A+++ defensive player at second base. If you get Sasaki, if you find a way to sign Vladdy long-term, is it a grand slam offseason? Maybe not. Does it guarantee they make the playoffs? No, I don't think it does. But is it a disaster? No, it wouldn't be at that point. Like it would, I think you'd look back and say, okay, you signed Vladdy, you got Sasaki, you brought in Hoffman, you made a Jimenez deal. Not a bad offseason.
If those things went to plan,
yes,
and Hoffman was
not
healthy,
a bad offseason.
You're right. I mean, the Sasaki thing would be a grand slam on its own, right? Because you have the opportunity to get a guy who would be your ace, who's a young guy who is essentially making a big financial sacrifice coming to Major League Baseball at this juncture of his career. And it's because he's told his agent that he wants to be a Hall of Famer. Like, this guy's got big ambitions. You're going to get him for something in the range of $10 million, maybe
and
less.
Team control for a long time.
Yeah, in an era where aces are making $40 million, you're going to get him for 10-ish. I mean, it's an absolute grand slam. And yeah, look, I mean, if you don't sign Vladdy, like the alternative to signing Vladdy is not signing Vladdy, and what's that going to do to the coming season if he's a pending free agent, and so is Bo Bichette.
Yes.
These two guys who've been the most identifiable players in your organization for most of the past decade are essentially in walk years.
Mm-hmm.
After you were last place in the AL East a year ago, and now your Vegas over-under 71.5.
Right.
It's not exactly a great advertisement. Come on down to the ballpark.
Listen, I gave you the glass half full.
Yeah.
There's a glass half empty in front of us here, too.
Yeah.
Sasaki picks the Dodgers. Vladdy says, I'm testing free agency, appreciate it. I may stay, but I may not. I'm this close. I'm gonna test it out. And, they don't sign Pete Alonso. They don't sign a Bregman. They don't sign Santander. And it's like, okay, you got Hoffman because he had to take your offer because the other teams wouldn't give him what he wanted anymore. Jimenez can't hit. Like, listen, there's a glass half empty. Don't get me wrong. What I'm saying is there's so much negativity driven towards the Blue Jays right now, all of it warranted, based on what happened last year and what's happened the last two off seasons. I'm a driving force in a lot of that. I'm cynical myself.
Yeah.
But there still is time here
to pull it out of the fire.
To pull something out here where if Sasaki chooses your program, that is very significant because of what you just said. If you find a way to get pen to paper for Vladdy long term and you commit to him and you say we're committed to him and we're committed to winning and building with him, that I think would be very significant because I think it would allow a fan base to breathe a little bit. Like there's a lot of anxiety that this team cannot land anybody, and that if they can't land their own guy, what the hell is what is out there in the future?
Right.
The only option at that point would seemingly be you have to go scorched earth and build from the bottom up.
Except your bottom has nothing on it right now.
No, exactly. But that's the point. Like you're starting basically at stage 1 of scorched earth, which means it's a minimum 5 years, and you're talking 2030 before you're compcompetitive again.
Yeah,
like that is
which is not
possibly
which is not the profile of a team. It's not the profile of a team that just dumped $400 million into renovating their ballpark.
Right.
They're in a come see us now mode,
and it's had a top 10 payroll, pretty consistently for years.
Exactly,
so.
and has a young superstar that they could have signed many times, in Vlad Guerrero, who they've neglected to sign until now, and may want to walk at this point.
Well, and this is where Vladdy's name is out there. There were multiple reports. Hector Gomez reporting. I think Andy Martino from I want to say SNY in New York, I believe, covers the Mets. Reported that the Mets checked in on Vladdy's availability, and take that for what it's worth. But now Buster Olney of ESPN, who's on First Up Weekly, he tweeted out a couple hours ago. This to me reads like a very substantial tweet. Buster tweeting, in the Mets' perfect world, they'd love to find a deal for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who, like Juan Soto, is a slugger who makes contact, 199 hits and 96 strikeouts last year. If they pulled off a trade for him, they could sign him before he hit the market, just like they did with Francisco Lindor, where they acquired him from Cleveland, then signed him going into his final season. Now, that reads as a report to me. That reads as Buster is saying, this is what the Mets hope happens. And again, what that means to me, if I'm the Blue Jays, and it could be a smokescreen, it could be, maybe this is Vladdy's camp leaking that out, who knows. But if the report, if you're the Blue Jays, what I read out of that is Steve Cohen's willing to pay him.
Yeah.
That's what I'm reading out of this. And if I'm Vlad Guerrero Jr., I love that that's out there.
Of course.
Because now you're like, listen, it's $450 whether you give it to me or Steve Cohen gives it to me.
I'll just wait.
I can wait it out.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't care about a luxury tax or penalties or punitive measures from Major League Baseball. He just gave my boy, $675 million,
yes.
Juan Soto. He gave my boy, Francisco Lindor, $365 million or whatever it was, and he's going to give me $450. And we're all going to go down there, and we're all friends, and we're going to take our talents to Queens.
Right.
And if you're Ross Atkins, if you're Mark Shapiro, but more importantly, if you're Rogers, you have to read that, and you got to figure out if it's accurate or not. And what I am curious about, because this was a big part of the reporting with Soto, Edward Rogers flew out to meet him. Is Edward meeting with Vladdy? Because you would think it's the same thing, is it not?
If it's red alert.
If it's red alert, and the big thing for agents and players, the proof that you're really committed is the owner actually puts in his own time.
That's right.
I'm curious to see if that's the case.
Yeah.
Is he the one calling, not calling directly maybe, but hey, let's set up a meeting and come by my house.
Right. And then, and by the way, if you're Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who at times we have pointed out on this show and others has struggled with the fact that he hasn't had a lot of protection in the lineup around him as a hitter, right? How many pitches has Vladdy seen in some years? Because guess what? He's the only guy that can really hurt you in the Blue Jays lineup at certain times, right? Given what they've gone through these past handful of years. How good does life sound hitting beside Juan Soto, either in front of or behind Juan Soto?
Yeah, with Lindor mixed in.
Yeah, slightly changed picture.
Oh, it's massively
you
significant.
Think about, and I also think Juan Soto would love to hear that too, because guess what? Hitting in front of Aaron Judge was pretty good life last year.
No kidding.
Made him look pretty darn good to the point where it made him an awful lot of money. I'm not saying that's the only reason he got the money. I'm not saying he's not a great hitter, but he was a much better hitter because of the fact that he was beside Aaron Judge in a lineup. Vladdy's not Aaron Judge. Vladdy's not Soto, but he's a reasonable facsimile of a good contact power hitter.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, there are reports coming out, Ken Rosenthal reporting, and others, that it sounds like Pete Alonso and the Mets likely will be parting ways. And that's where the Vladdy connection comes in. And again, trying to read the tea leaves, are the Mets willing to move off Alonso because they feel good about their chances of getting Vladdy?
Yeah.
Again, and the power is still in the hands of the Blue Jays for this year. You don't have to trade him. You don't have to move off him. It may be an option for the Blue Jays, though. They may have that on the table as well.
Taking Alonso out.
Yeah. A, get Alonso, but B, if the Mets are so ambitious to acquire Vladdy, if you sign Alonso and you determine you're not paying Vladdy, shouldn't you trade Vladdy to the Mets between now and spring training?
And get a windfall.
Absolutely.
Start whatever you're trying to start.
Right, because if the alternative is he's just going to play it out and leave, and you're not going to win anything this year anyway, although maybe they're delusional enough to think that they will.
But you know what? There is some logic to that, because normally in the beginning of a walk year, you might not get much back. But because the Mets are in win now mode after dumping all that money into Juan Soto's pickup truck, they need it to work now. And Vladdy would help it work now quicker than anything they could get.
Well, certainly more than Pete Alonso.
That's what I mean.
Alonso's a good
anything
player,
else on the market right now, he is the number one piece that would help ensure that Juan Soto's a massive success as a New York Met.
Big time. And if there's some collusion there, which I would assume there would be, if it's an understanding, when we acquire you, we also are going to pay you this, then there's probably more, well, there would be more willingness from the Mets to basically open up the doors and the coffers and say, you tell us what you're looking for here. Now, what makes this complicated is Ross Atkins also has to be in win now mode.
Right.
Whether you believe he can win now or not is a different story. He's going on a decade as a GM who hasn't won a playoff game. And Shapiro and Atkins are public enemy number one in this market.
Yes.
No one takes more heat than those two. So you're coming off a bad season, a lost season. Are you going to trade Vladdy for futures? Are you going to trade him for, the number 1 and 3 prospect in the Mets? And I don't even know who those players are.
Yeah,
but,
you're right.
What if they're in single A and double A? And it's like, yeah, they'll join you in 27. 2027.
Tough sell.
Is that something Ross Atkins can even entertain right now?
It's a tough sell because then everybody's going to be doing the revisionist, and rightly so, the revisionist history of, well, if you were never going to sign him, why didn't you trade him earlier when he had way more value?
Right.
Why didn't you just make this decision 1 year ago, 2 years ago, when the value of Vladdy, because he was under team control for multiple years, would have been far higher, right? I mean, that would be a reasonable criticism of a deal like that. On top of that, Hayes, we all kind of know this is a bit of a PR situation they're in right now. Their PR is really bad.
The Blue Jays.
Nobody believes they're going to win anything next year,
no.
Right? So that's kind of out the window. They're a 71.5 win team in the Vegas over-unders right now.
Yeah, which is staggeringly low.
Staggeringly low.
That's not far.
They're not winning, but they got to win a press conference. They got to win the opening spring training conference where they can at least spin some sort of a tale of legitimacy. Because right now, to your point, I can't think of a management group that's been really more hated than this one. There's visceral hate.
Yeah, it's
that
bad.
boils over. In my community of Blue Jay fans,
yes.
I mean, there's disdain.
No, there's legitimate anger and kind of disgust with the whole operation and the way it all operates.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of faith that they're going to make it any better. But maybe their best PR move would be just throw some money at Vladdy. If they get Sasaki, it'd be huge. Maybe they make an offer to Bregman.
Listen. That at some point though, they don't have that much money, right?
Why not? There's no cap.
There isn't a cap. There is budgets. Perfect world, they would do that.
I know.
But at some point, it's probably going to come to an end. But you can paint that picture as a win, a big win. If you get Sasaki to buy into you and your program, and you sign Vladdy, that to me, I think, would gain a majority of Blue Jay fans back on the side of the Blue Jays. Maybe not individually, Atkins, Shapiro, collectively, the two of them, the front office, and what their future is. But it would be a feel-good story.
Right.
All of a sudden, you've got your star. The face of the franchise is Vladdy. He's been the face of the franchise effectively since he signed here, certainly since he arrived. And then you bring in Sasaki, who I believe they would have team control of for 6 years.
Yeah.
So if you have a stud arm, a stud bat, then you can kind of work through everything else. In 25, I still don't think you're going to win enough ball games to put you over the top, but you can maybe start planting seeds for what it could be in 26, right? They're not going to. That's a PR disaster and marketing disaster. You're not going to come out and say, we're not going to win anything in 25, but I'm telling you in 26 we will, because no one's going to buy that, and they're not going to do that. But I think if you're a smart baseball fan and you buy into what the future could be, you could read into that sales pitch and believe that it possibly could work.
Yeah, it starts to line
it
up
could turn around properly.
Yeah.
Right?
For a kid with the talent of Sasaki to choose you would legitimize you in a way that almost nothing else could.
Right.
If this kid said, "Hey, I looked at the Dodgers, I looked at San Diego, which a beautiful place to live as well, and I chose Toronto." Very unlikely, right? So that would be the underdog win of the century,
big time
in free
for
agency.
Yeah.
So, but beyond that, when your most popular player is hanging in this limbo like Vladdy is right now, you're in a very dangerous place.
It is. Yeah, and it's a conundrum they put themselves in, right? Like Bo Bichette no one even talks about Bichette.
And he was one of their most popular players for a long time.
Absolutely,
There were moments where it looked like this was his team.
Yeah.
But doing what he did last year.
Well, and the injuries and his performance, he wiped himself off the map.
Yeah.
Like he can return quickly with a hot spring. You hit the ground running. But, I don't know what his future is going to be. I don't feel great about his future in Toronto. It feels like these two parties are moving towards a breakup by the end of next year.
And again, revisionist history and all, but likely going to get very little for him.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that Bo's the Bo play in terms of moving off him, if they decide to do that, is he has a great April, great May, great June. They're on pace for 70 wins, and you trade him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that. And listen, that could be a possibility with Vladdy. Like, it could be a scenario where they get to camp, they break camp, he plays, you get into July, you're not going anywhere, Vladdy's playing well, and they decide we gotta trade him. And you'd get something. You get a lot for Vladdy. You wouldn't get as much as you would during an offseason and during a sweepstakes league-wide, but someone would pay a lot, clearly.
Yeah, a desperate team that feels they need that piece.
Sure.
You may be able to strike something there.
But that's the worst case scenario for Atkins and Shapiro, is you get to this trade deadline and you have to flip Vladdy and or Bo and put the white flag up. Like, at that point, you might as well just say, we're leaving too. Like, there's no way you can survive that.
You have to wonder, because, I mean, the other scenario there is you got the guy that owns that club and controls that club. He's about to become the czar of Toronto sports. He's about to own everything.
Yes.
And so he's got a bit of a PR problem because no one knows who he is. No one's really seen his face, but for brief glimpses. And he's got to make a statement about how he's going to run not just the Blue Jays, but the Raptors and the Leafs and the Argos and TFC.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's going to control it all in very short order here.
That's right.
And so if the Blue Jays are a dumpster fire when he takes over as the major domo of the entire Toronto sports scene, that's not going to be a good position to be in.
No. Wizard of Oz type vibes.
Yeah,
like, you gotta get it done, man.
You got to make a statement about how you're going to run things.
Big time.
And that you actually are in control and you know what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, again, we're less than a month away now from pitchers and catchers reporting, and if you believe in what Vladdy's saying, that he's not going to negotiate beyond that, then you got about a month to figure this out. If you're Atkins and Shapiro, and again, Ken Rosenthal reporting that they haven't had any contract negotiations since before Christmas.
And yet there are conflicting reports that they're actively negotiating.
Exactly.
So it's hard to know.
Who knows? It is difficult to know at this point. Joe Bowen, Jim Ralph coming up in about 20 minutes. Leafs Devils tonight. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, we have sent Al's brother out into the world with a pair of Leaf tickets, and you have to guess where he's hiding for your chance to win them. He's already given 3 clues this week, Dave, and this is the 4th and final. I am quite curious. I think I know where he is by now, but if you don't know where he is and you want a pair of Leaf tickets, you better tune in. You better find out here, because this is the 4th and final clue of the week.
Hey, Overdrive fans, it's Thursday, which means it's time for your final clue to find out where is Al's brother and get you one step closer to those Leafs and Lightning tickets on January 20th. And look, my car almost broke down on my way here, but luckily there are a ton of new and used cars at the place that I am at. Perhaps a new Ford could be in my future.
Al's brother, very sneaky. I like it. All right. When you hear the cue to call tomorrow, the first caller through with the correct location will win a pair of tickets again to see the Leafs play the Lightning on Monday. Find Al's Brothers, brought to you by McAlpine Ford in Aurora. Our family, the Ford family, and you. Full details at tsn1050.ca. You got Devils in town tonight, Leafs in Montreal tomorrow. Montreal's in Dallas tonight. That won't be an easy game. And then you got the Leafs and Lightning on Monday. So do you think Joseph Woll will play all 3 games?
I don't think so. I think they're worried about him, man. I mean, I think putting Hildeby in the other night tells you that, right? It tells you that they understand that this guy has never played this kind of workload before in his career, and he's got a very extensive injury history throughout his pro career, and they cannot afford for Joseph Woll to get injured at this particular moment.
No, they can't. Because I'm not holding my breath Anthony Stolarz returns before the Four Nations face-off.
No.
It just feels like that's what's going to happen here. Like you're going to give him the month, and he's going to get the break, and then he'll come back and be ready, which means you get a lot of games between now and then, including a Western trip where they go through Western Canada. They go through Seattle.
But even if they, like a lot of people pointed out, they don't have back-to-back from now until the Four Nations. But as you point out, they have a lot of games.
Yeah, every other night is still a lot of workload, man.
Still a lot of workload and especially for a guy who, really, hasn't done this. He's on pace for 40 plus, and he's never done more than 20 plus.
It is just confounding to me that it's even a discussion that a 26-year-old can't play games every other night.
Well, but you look at his numbers.
No, I know that. I know
splits.
that.
The splits with 1 day's rest are not good. 2 days rest, he's better, and 3 days rest, he's even better. But
he's not a starting pitcher. It's like gotta go. I know what the numbers are, and I get it. I get it.
These guys are like gymnasts.
But and I guess Hellebuck's different, but he plays all the time. There's one Hellebuck, I understand that, but Vasilevsky and Bob, they play. And listen, maybe just he's incapable of that, and maybe they already have that answer, and this is just going to be the reality. I would want to keep pushing the envelope. Can you give us more? Can you give us more? But I sense that they're reluctant to do that.
If Babcock was here, he'd do it.
He would play him. For sure he would. Final hour coming up. Joe Bowen, Jimmy Ralph will join us. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050, soon to be up on TSN 2.